So Prisoners is a mystery crime thriller directed by Denis Villeneuve. It was met with widespread critical acclaim back when it came out in 2013, and it's one of his most respected works to date. And despite the fact that this film did well at the box office and has been praised by many, it still somehow manages to be an underrated masterpiece. It only got one Oscar nomination, and that was for Best Cinematography, a very well-deserved nomination that didn't win. And it deserved so many more nominations that it didn't get. That is, in my opinion, one of the biggest crimes in Academy history. And even though I know film fans love Prisoners, the amount of people who haven't seen it is kind of astonishing to me. The amount of times I've recommended this film to people who haven't seen it blows my mind. I always felt that Prisoners was somewhat of a cult classic at this point, but I might have overestimated that. But what makes this movie such an underrated masterpiece that is still worth checking out 10 years later? Hey, what is going on, everyone? It is your boy Nick here. On the day this video comes out, Prisoners will be a decade old. So I figured that I would do an analysis review as to why I love this film in honor of its 10th anniversary. And just like my analysis review for Taxi Driver, this review will contain a heavy amount of spoilers, and the film's R rating means that this video will not be suitable for younger audiences, as it does explore some rather dark themes that will be triggering to some. There's even some scenes that I'll have to heavily censor in order to talk about, as they're too graphic for YouTube. I also want to say that just because I recommend this movie, that does not mean that I recommend it to all people. If you want to watch Prisoners, I highly suggest checking out its content warnings in case you're not sure whether or not you'll be able to handle it. I will be exploring the direction of this movie, but I will also be explaining why I feel the film is quite underrated for being as well made as it is. Now with that all being said, let's analyze Prisoners. The opening sequence to Prisoners shows us a snowy forest while the Lord's Prayer is being told by our protagonist, Keller Dover, played by Hugh Jackman. We see a deer wandering around and pan backward to discover that Keller is actually hunting with his son Ralph. On the drive home, we quickly discover that Keller works in remodeling and repairing, which is an important detail that matters later on. Keller tells Ralph about a lesson his dad taught him. That lesson is to always be ready no matter what stands in front of you. Another important detail that matters later on. We then see an RV driving through a neighborhood, the same one where the Dovers live. It's here that we are introduced to the rest of Keller's family. We meet his wife, Grace, played by Maria Bello, and his young daughter, Anna. We see the Dovers walk down the street to visit their neighbors for Thanksgiving, explaining why they went deer hunting in the first place. We're introduced to Nancy Birch, played by Viola Davis, her husband Franklin, played by Terrence Howard, and their teenage daughter Eliza, and their young daughter Joy. During meal preparation, the four kids go outside while they wait, and they come across a parked RV, the same RV we saw a few minutes ago. Anna starts climbing on the RV and Ralph has to pull her off. They hear music playing inside the RV and decide to go back inside. There's a brief shot from inside the RV looking out the window, which tells us that someone is inside there. We then see a brief scene of the families eating dinner, and another brief scene of Anna and Joy playing with Joy's hamster. These two scenes are done to show the loving nature of these two families. They all care deeply about one another and can't imagine life without each other. We see the parents hanging out in the living room, where Franklin is getting ready to play the trumpet. Anna comes to ask her mom if Joy can go across the street to their house. She makes mention of an emergency whistle that she lost a while back, and thinks Joy can help her find it. We'll revisit why this is important later. The emergency whistle was given to Anna by her dad, and Grace is convinced that it's lost for good. This is an important detail as it shows how protective of a father Keller really is. Franklin jokes that the girls need to whistle with their mouths in order to find the missing whistle. He whistles the first few notes of Jingle Bells and encourages the girls to sing along. When they do, the girls sing the famous Jingle Bells Batman Smells version of the song. Another important detail that we'll revisit later. The parents allow them to go across the street to the Dovers' house. The parents briefly discuss the types of music they like, another scene that shows how close these two families are. Prisoners is riddled with little scenes like this. It's really great storytelling for these characters. When Franklin starts playing the trumpet, we cut to this outdoor shot of two trees outside of the Birch's house, and the music starts to get creepy. Keller goes down to the basement to ask the teens about the girls. Not only do the teens not know where the girls are, but they weren't even aware that they left the house. The girls didn't go down to get the teens to walk them across the street. The two families check both of their houses thoroughly and can't find them anywhere. Ralph remembered the RV that Anna was climbing on earlier, and the family spread out among the neighborhood. Ralph takes Keller to the house that the RV was parked outside of to discover that the RV is now gone. The two families are now worried that their daughters have been kidnapped and think the owner of the RV had something to do with it, so of course the police get involved. We get to a Chinese restaurant with only one customer on this Thanksgiving holiday. We are introduced to Detective Loki, played marvelously by Jake Gyllenhaal. Him being there alone tells that he doesn't have an immediate family to spend the holiday with. He wears all black and has tattoos and slicked back hair, giving him somewhat of a dark and grungy aesthetic. He jokes with the waitress about Chinese zodiac signs before being called to investigate the missing children. This brief scene is a great introduction to his character. It shows that underneath his dark and brooding exterior is a good man with pure intentions. Loki arrives on scene at a gas station and the RV from earlier is identified. The person driving the RV pulls out, making it seem like they're going to drive away, but then goes crashing into a tree head first. Loki goes inside and puts the suspect in handcuffs and pulls him out, demanding that he tells the police where the girls are. We are introduced to Alex Jones, played by Paul Dano, and his silence throughout this whole encounter leads to his arrest. We then see Loki interrogate Alex back at the station, and something interesting happens in this encounter. As the interrogation is happening, Loki's eyes start to blink and twitch really quickly. This was an acting choice from Gyllenhaal. It's done to show that Loki is under severe pressure. Alex doesn't admit to anything, but his story doesn't entirely make sense either. He said he was just going for a drive. Loki doesn't buy it for a minute, as it makes no sense for Alex to go for a drive and park in a neighborhood that he doesn't live in. That's when we learn that Alex lived with his Aunt Holly and keeps his RV in her backyard. Loki goes to visit Alex's aunt, and we are introduced to Holly Jones, played by Melissa Leo. We learn some important information on Alex's family. We learn that Alex's parents died in a car accident when he was 6, and has been living with his aunt ever since. We also learn that Holly's husband has been dead for a few years, which we'll revisit later. We also learn from Holly that Alex doesn't stay out after dark, so that drives up more suspicion about his activity. And while investigating his room, Loki finds a toy RV that resembles the one Alex drives in real life. More on this later. Loki meets with the forensics team and learns that nothing in the RV can serve as evidence, but they still have enough on Alex to keep him at the station for a while. This causes the police department to do searches throughout the woods where the gas station is, just in case Alex might have taken them into the forest. The next morning, Loki meets with the Birches, where he receives a photo of Joy. We then cut to a brief scene back at the Dover's house, and Keller is washing his face. He looks over to see a pink toothbrush that belongs to Anna, serving as another reminder of the horrible situation that's happening. One other thing to point out is that Keller is wearing a cross around his neck. Prisoners is loaded with images of crosses. The next shot shows us that Loki has a cross tattoo. This cross, combined with the Lord's Prayer said at the beginning of the film, tells us that Keller is a man of God, and that he has a deep connection in his faith. An event like this would definitely cause someone like Keller to start questioning his faith. During a conversation between Loki and Grace, we learn that Loki's solved every case he's ever been a part of, showing us that he's a smart detective who's more than trustworthy in solving this case. It's reaffirmed that Loki doesn't have any kids, but he still cares about finding the missing kids. Keller comes out of the bathroom and meets Loki, and they start to discuss the info regarding the case. Loki tells Keller that they haven't found any proof that Alex is guilty, despite being the primary suspect. We also learn from Loki that Alex has the IQ of a 10-year-old, so it's highly unlikely that he was able to pull off a kidnapping. We also discovered that the two families, as well as Alex, took a lie detector test, and that they couldn't use anything against Alex as he didn't understand the questions. Keller is still suspicious of Alex, as it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that someone with an IQ of a 10-year-old could drive an RV. Loki even found that Alex has a legal license. It also doesn't make much sense to Keller that Alex tried to run from the police if he's not guilty. Loki understands Keller's points and tells him that the police are doing the best they can and that they're considering all possibilities. Loki gets in his car to leave, and Keller stops him for a minute. Keller asks if Alex will stay in custody until the girls are found. Loki tells him that they can only hold Alex for 48 hours due to lack of evidence, or unless charges are pressed. Keller demands that Alex stay in custody longer, even if it means breaking a few rules. Loki meets with the captain of the police force to ask that Alex be held for just one more day despite no evidence. He explains that Keller was dealing with the situation hardly and that he'd appreciate it if they held Alex longer. The captain denies Loki's request, suggesting that Keller will be mad regardless, and that he'll be grateful when they find his daughter. At this point, the girls have been gone for 24 hours, and Loki informs the captain that he has the addresses of 9 level 3 sex offenders that live within a 10-mile radius of their area. He's going to investigate them to see if they played a role in the abduction. We see a quick montage of Loki investigating a few suspects until he arrives at this one house. He rings the doorbell and knocks on the door to no response. Loki goes to the side of the house and peeks through the window to see the owner passed out on the floor. Loki rushes inside to discover that he's just drunk and asleep, not dead. Loki investigates the kitchen and finds the outline of where the fridge used to be, only the fridge is right next to it. He moves the fridge to the side and discovers a secret door. The door leads to a basement that doesn't even have any stairs, just a big drop. Loki discovers a rotting corpse in the basement. The corpse is tied up in a chair with tape on its mouth, suggesting that the homeowner has abducted someone before, making him a suspect. The corpse also has a necklace with a pendant of a maze, which we'll discuss later. We also see Loki blink again. Loki holds the homeowner over to the basement drop, and we learn that this man is actually a priest. The priest tells Loki that the corpse is actually a confessor who admitted to killing 16 children. Loki arrests the priest, taking him into custody. We also learn that Loki spent 6 years in a boys' home before joining the police, explaining where his dark and brooding nature comes from. He has a troubled past that led him to joining law enforcement. We cut to see Keller, Franklin, and Ralph searching the forest along with the police. Keller gets a call from Grace and learns that Alex is being released from custody today and flees from the others. Alex is signing out, and his aunt is trying to help him as he's struggling to write his name. He even puts his name on multiple columns. Loki gives Alex a very suspicious look, as this could just be a trick. Alex can barely even make eye contact with him. News anchors ambush Alex outside the station, but he stays calm. Keller pulls up just in time, and he grabs Alex by the shirt and asks what he did with the girls. Alex says, "They didn't cry until I left them." The police come and pull an enraged Keller off of Alex, and Alex goes free. Keller is uncuffed in the captain's office and is let off easy. Keller informs the captain and Loki what Alex said in the parking lot. Loki agrees to investigate the Joneses after finding out about this. Keller is still mad that they didn't have him in custody longer and demands that Alex be arrested. Loki even tells the captain that he should have taken his request of one more day in custody. Loki meets with the Joneses and asks if Alex said anything in the parking lot that could have been misinterpreted. Holly says that she didn't hear Alex say anything, and that all she saw was him getting attacked. Loki asks to speak alone with Alex. Loki warns him that if he or his aunt are withholding any information, Holly can go to jail for a long time. Loki calls Keller to let him know that he couldn't get anything out of Alex, no matter how hard he tried. Loki says that he has to move on to other suspects, but that he will inform Keller of anything new. The Dovers are reacting very harshly to the situation. Grace is so distraught she's been forgetting to take her meds, as well as losing sleep. She says to Keller that he's always made her feel safe and that she felt he could protect the family from anything. After this moment of doubt, Keller decides to leave the house, but before he goes, he tells Ralph to be brave in looking after Grace. He also tells him that he's going out to help the police. When Keller gets in his truck, we see another cross, and the radio plays a religious speech. This plays further into Keller's crisis of faith. Keller takes matters into his own hands and is now stalking the Jones house. He witnesses Alex walking his dog, and Alex briefly hangs his dog by the collar. A horrible thing to witness, but then right after, Alex starts singing the version of Jingle Bells that the girls were singing on Thanksgiving. Keller approaches Alex with a gun and asks where he's heard these words. We see Keller pick up Franklin at his house. During the drive, Keller asks if Franklin brought a change of clothes like he asked, and Franklin has no idea what they're about to do. Keller pulls up to an abandoned apartment house. He takes Franklin inside, and we see that Keller has Alex tied up in a bathroom. Keller tells Franklin about the Jingle Bells song, and Franklin suggests going to the police. But Keller has lost faith in the police at this point, and says that they either have to hurt Alex until he talks, or else their daughters will die. He even goes as far as to say that Alex stopped being a human when he kidnapped their daughters. We are now seeing Keller's crisis of faith lead him down a dark path. There's a few things to point out. When they pull up, we find out that Keller used to live in the apartment house. This is not the first time we hear of this place. During Thanksgiving, Keller's son Ralph suggested that they rent out an apartment house that used to belong to Ralph's grandfather. So if this place belonged to Keller's father, then Keller most likely grew up here. This is also where Keller's job in remodeling is important. Keller has two excuses to be there. The place belonged to his father, which means he might have ownership of the building, and he could also use his job in remodeling as a cover-up for him being there. He has the perfect hideout for his vigilante activity. Loki is now standing outside the house where the RV was parked. He's on the phone and is told that they still don't have any evidence of anything. Back at the station, Loki looks up the address of that house he was just at, and finds an old news story of how a boy who lived in that house got kidnapped 26 years prior. The boy's name was Barry, and Loki tracks down Barry's mother to ask questions. Barry's mother shows Loki the last recording she had of him. She tells Loki that he was playing outside, just a few feet away from where they say the RV was parked. Loki doesn't know what any of this means, and neither does Barry's mother, as Barry was never found. This is the first time where Loki is presented with some discouraging news. Loki is called back to talk with the priest he arrested. Loki asks for specifics on the man that the priest killed. The priest isn't very informative, but he tells Loki that the confessor he killed was kidnapping children as a way to wage war with God. Loki leaves the room disappointed as he's not given much. We'll discuss the importance of this later. Back at the apartment house, Keller is beating the crap out of Alex while Franklin is holding him down. Keller keeps demanding that Alex tell him where the girls are. Alex is silent throughout this whole scene. He won't admit to anything, but you can see it in his face that he's scared. Keller stops for a brief moment and is breathing heavily. He keeps telling Alex that the sooner he answers the question, the sooner he'll be let go. Keller even says that he sees it in Alex's eyes that he knows where they are. They take Alex and put him up against the wall. Keller threatens to use a hammer on Alex if he keeps staying silent. He goes berserk and starts smashing the sink as he yells the question. He even smashes a hole in the wall close to Alex's head. One thing I love about this scene is how exhausted the characters look afterwards. You can tell nobody wants to be here, making it even more terrifying that it's even happening. Franklin comes home to his family to find people outside their house lighting candles and leaving things in condolences for the family. We also see in this scene that the torturing of Alex is weighing down on Franklin. It saddens him that the situation has escalated to this point. After the Birches head inside, Loki is observing this one man in a hood who's leaving a stuffed animal. Loki walks to the other side of the crowd and notices this hooded man running away as fast as he can. Loki chases him for a while and actually has a pretty close call, but eventually loses him. The next morning, Franklin is watching the news and the face of the hooded man is identified in a sketch drawing. The broadcast says to report any sightings of this man as he's now a major suspect. We see a brief scene outside the apartment house where Franklin is trying to convince Keller that Alex is likely innocent, as the hooded man is now the primary suspect. Keller tries to convince Franklin that the two of them are working together, and he insists that he heard Alex say that the girls were crying when he left them. Loki comes into the captain's office with the collar that belonged to the dog that Alex was walking. We learned that Alex's dog got hit as he was never brought home after Alex's abduction. We also learned that Holly didn't want to tell the police about the dog when they called her because she thought it would get Alex into trouble. Loki has an argument with the captain for not keeping the Jones family under surveillance, as Loki needs to know where everyone is. This raises some suspicion for the Jones family, so Loki demands that the captain keep surveillance on everyone and to update him on any new information. Loki is now watching the tapes of Alex in the interrogation room. He still can't get any dirt on Alex from watching these tapes. Loki gets interrupted with an alert that the hooded man was identified at a clothing store by an employee. The employee tells Loki that she sees him in that store very often, and always buys children's clothes in different sizes. She even caught him messing around with the mannequins one time. This man also only pays in cash. All of these clues raise major questions about this man. It makes no sense that he would buy children's clothes regularly in different sizes if he doesn't have any kids. He also clearly pays in cash so he can't be identified by employees. We see a brief scene at the apartment house where Keller suspects that this could be the last night to make finding the girls count, as they've been missing for 5 days now, showing that Keller is considering that the girls might be getting ready to die. Franklin comes home late to a worried Nancy. We then cut to Keller at his house and he gets a knock on the door from the Birches. Franklin told Nancy everything, and she now wants to see Alex. We arrive at the apartment house, and Nancy meets Alex beaten to a pulp. This visual is way too graphic for YouTube, so I'm not going to show it. But Nancy is horrified and tries to get to Alex by showing compassion. Nancy shows him a photo of Joy, as well as a stuffed animal that she sleeps with. She tries to use empathy to get to Alex and even trusts that he'll tell her if she unties him. She unties Alex and he says, "Help me," and he then pushes her over and tries to escape through the bathroom window. Franklin stops Alex, and Alex stabs Keller in the shoulder with a piece of glass. He gets Alex to drop the shard, and they tie him up again. The Birches leave, and Keller gets to some woodwork. He knocks on the Birches' door and has them come to the apartment house. Keller unveils a boarded-up shower that has Alex inside of it. The only light he gets is through a little hole, and the shower is rigged to only come out scalding or freezing. There's even a photo of the girls outside of the shower in case they start to feel sorry for Alex. Keller says that they can't hurt him anymore without killing him, so this was the next best option. The Birches can't believe what they're seeing. They think Keller has officially lost his mind. Franklin tries to convince Keller that he's taking this too far, and Keller tells him that he doubts someone is watching over their daughters the way that Franklin is watching over Alex. Keller even says that Franklin can free Alex if he wants and that he won't stop him. Franklin grabs the hammer and gets ready to do just that before Nancy stops and asks him to think about Joy. This dialogue is so important as it shows us that even though these characters are starting to lose their faith, they still feel bad about what they're doing. Keller doesn't want to torture Alex, but he feels that he has no choice. Franklin wants to believe that Alex is innocent, but he can't promise that he is. Nancy doesn't want to keep him there, but just like Keller, worries that letting him go will lead nowhere. This is why I love the character dynamic of Prisoners. Nobody in the scene wants to hurt each other, but they all feel that they have to in order to protect themselves and the ones they love. Amazing writing here. We see a shadow of a hooded man creeping outside the Birch house. He goes inside and creepily sneaks up the stairs. Eliza is taking a bath and talking to Ralph on the phone. She talks about needing to leave her house. The call suggests that Ralph thinks they should go to the apartment house, but she declines. This is an important detail that shows us how uncomfortable the teenagers are getting in their own homes after the kidnapping. The hooded man is listening to the conversation through the door. We cut briefly to the driveway where Nancy tells Franklin that they can't stop Keller, but that they don't have to help him either. They've officially chosen to stay out of what Keller is doing. By the time they get inside the house, the hooded man is nowhere to be found. The parents worry that they can't find Eliza, but it turns out she's still in the bathroom and is upset that they left the house without telling her, showing a lack of feeling secure and safe within the Birch house. The hooded man is now creeping inside the Dover's house. He creeps around the second level and wakes up Grace. She calls for Ralph and doesn't get an answer, so she suspects that Anna might have returned. When she goes into the hallway, she discovers a window that got left open. Ralph comes out to see what's up and closes the window. Grace is almost positive that it was Anna. We now see Grace telling the story to Detective Loki. As he's writing the report, Grace remembers the basement where she says the kids aren't allowed. They go down to the basement where Keller keeps his equipment and emergency items. Loki notices a bag of lye that is half empty. Lye is a chemical that is typically used to make soap. However, it is also a corrosive that can be used to dissolve a dead body. With reports of Alex missing and a half bag of lye, Loki starts to become suspicious of Keller. Loki asks Grace where Keller even is and if he's typically out this late. Grace was going to ask Loki the same question as she was told that Keller is helping the police search for Anna. Loki is now on to Keller. The next morning, Loki watches Keller pull out of his driveway and follows him undercover. He sees Keller pull into a liquor store parking lot and watches him walk in the opposite direction toward the street. A big truck pulls up behind Loki and honks repeatedly as Loki is parked in the street. This gets Keller's attention and he walks back to the liquor store and goes inside. After a while, Keller comes back out with a bottle and approaches Loki and asks why he's following him. Loki tells Keller to get in the car and busts him for walking towards Campello Street. We learn here that Keller had actually been sober from alcohol for 9.5 years, and tells Loki that he was going to walk around the street before making a decision to drink again, but then made up his mind. This is important as it shows that Keller most likely went through some hardship earlier in his life that most likely led to an alcohol addiction, showing that this is not the first time that Keller has experienced extreme hardship in his life. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the reason he became a Christian. Loki busts him for the lie in his basement and for lying to his wife about helping the police. Keller says that he used the bag of lie to bury their dog a year prior, and that helping the police sounded better than driving aimlessly at night. Loki asks if that's what he did a few nights ago, as it's convenient that Alex went missing the same day that Keller attacked him at the station. Keller isn't a suspect, but he says that he knows of Alex's vanishing and thought that the police had surveillance on him like he was told. He suggests that Alex probably skipped town because he might actually be guilty. Loki tells Keller that the best he can do right now is to take care of himself and his family, because they need to be ready in case Anna comes home. Keller excuses lying to his family by saying that Anna is wondering every passing day why her dad's not there to rescue her, and that he can't get a good night's rest with this happening. Keller tells Loki to keep looking for Anna, and Loki lets him walk home. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, as Loki is on to Keller, but Keller was still smart enough to get himself off the hook. Also, the vulnerability from Keller helps Loki understand why he would lie to his family and go out at night. Loki definitely knows that Keller's not innocent, but he doesn't have enough on him to prove him guilty. So although they may not agree with each other, they understand each other. When Keller gets home, he passes out on his bed and has a dream where he wakes up to see Anna standing next to the bed. She found her emergency whistle, which gave Keller relief, until he woke up and realized that it was just a dream. Back at the station, Loki does some research about Campello Street, the street that Keller was heading for previously. He finds a story about a corrections officer who committed suicide in the apartment house where Keller lived. It turns out that the officer was Keller's dad, and this happened when he was a teenager, confirming that as the childhood home of Keller, as well as his past hardships. Loki is now putting the pieces together. Something else I want to mention here is that this is not the first time that we hear about Keller's dad being a former correction officer. This was first referenced in the scene where Keller was cuffed in the captain's office. It was actually one of the reasons why the captain let Keller off so easily. Keller walks back to the apartment house and he runs a scalding hot shower on Alex. Alex screams in pain and we see Keller struggling to deal with his actions. He's tearing up and even had a brief moment before running the water where you could tell he didn't want to do what he did. Alex starts saying the words, "I'm not Alex." This obviously gets Keller's attention and he tells Alex that he'll set him free if he reveals the location of his daughters. Alex says that he was waiting for him and he never showed up, suggesting that Alex is actually a different person who is part of a bigger plan. A very weird hint to drop, as it's bizarre for Alex to be passing himself off as someone he's supposedly not. I'd like to think that this is done to add another layer of humanity to Alex. He definitely seems guilty, but given his IQ status, it seems rational to think that Alex was just a piece of a much larger puzzle. Even though Alex might be lying about being someone else, there probably is some truth to this statement about waiting for someone who never showed up. Being part of a larger plan is a rational way to conclude that Alex is guilty to some extent. Keller gets ready to run the water on him again because he's tired of hints, but he stops and starts praying, asking for God to pardon his sins and to show him the way. The Christianity in Keller wants him to consider the humanity in Alex, even if it's hard to do. Loki is outside the apartment house and is ready to investigate. Keller tells Alex to keep quiet and he goes downstairs and pretends to be passed out from drinking. Loki wakes up Keller and starts to investigate the place. He asks Keller questions about the girls and about Alex, but Keller denies everything. Loki's investigation is cut short when he gets a phone call from the employee at the clothing store. The man identified on TV was just there and she got his license plate number. Loki leaves to find this man and orders Keller to go home. Loki arrives at this man's house and we are officially introduced to Bob Taylor, played by David Dastmalchian. Loki busts him for running away the other night and for buying children's clothes. Loki asks if he has any children, and when Bob says no, Loki busts in and puts Bob in handcuffs. Loki investigates the house and calls the station letting them know that he has Bob. Loki discovers a lot of weird things in Bob's house. The most obvious is all the maze drawings on the wall, something we'll revisit later. But he also notices a pig's head in the sink and a room full of locked chests. He puts Bob in the back of the car and gets out a crowbar to crack the chests open. He discovers that most of the chests have kids' clothes covered in blood, and also have live snakes. He opens one chest with a journal inside of it, and the journal has even more drawings of mazes. We cut back to the station and Loki is showing the Birches photos of the kids' clothes to see if they recognize anything. Keller is waiting outside the room and he notices the Birches walking out crying. This has absolutely no context, which is even more terrifying. Keller gets called in for the same reason. We find out briefly that Bob confessed to murdering the girls, but they don't have any proof of that yet, so hopefully Bob is lying. We also learn that the Birches positively identified 2 pieces of clothing, which is very reassuring to Keller that the worst is possible. Keller doesn't recognize any of the clothing, but he does recognize one sock with a pink bunny embroidered on it. Keller is distraught and says that this is Loki's fault for wasting time following him, when he might have been able to save the girls. This is one of the darkest scenes in the movie, but there is some potential light at the end of the tunnel. The bodies have not been found yet, so this could still possibly be a lie from Bob. When Keller gets home, he watches Grace sleeping and he doesn't have it in him to tell her that Anna might be dead. Ralph and Keller are sitting in Anna's room, and Keller notices a TV crew outside, most likely getting ready to interview the Birches. Keller tells Ralph to avoid the crew. Ralph asks if it's true that the girls are dead, as that's what Eliza told him. Keller says that they aren't, and that he feels that they're still out there, and that he's going to go out for a while and look for them. Keller tells Ralph to make sure that Grace doesn't find out about the death rumors at all costs. Ralph believes the rumors and accuses Keller of going out to get drunk because he can smell the liquor on him. Keller grabs Ralph in a fit of rage and tells him to shut up. We are now starting to see Keller lose his faith again, as he knows it's unlikely that he'll be able to find the girls. Back at the station, Bob is in the interrogation room supposedly drawing a map. According to a conversation between Loki and the captain, Bob's been drawing for 3.5 hours and hasn't given any information on where the bodies are yet, as he refused to answer the questions. Bob's awkwardness in the scene is very similar to that of Alex's awkwardness, and they both didn't answer the police questions, raising major suspicion about the role Bob plays in this case. What's also peculiar is that Bob is supposed to be drawing a map and is instead drawing what seems to be a maze. Loki knows that Bob has a thing for mazes, and so after the captain decides to leave, Loki goes into the room to get answers out of Bob. Loki's blinking his eyes again as he's interrogating Bob. This is the most stressed out Loki has been throughout the entire film. Bob is starting to breathe heavily, and the intensity is rising. Loki snaps and starts banging Bob's head against the table, demanding that he tell them what he's drawing. Bob insists that he can't, and that only makes Loki angrier. 2 other cops run into the room to get Loki off of Bob, and as they pull him off, Bob pulls Loki's gun out of his holster. The 3 officers, now scared, point their guns at Bob, demanding that he put the gun down. Bob points the gun at his own head, and Loki tries to convince Bob not to shoot himself, but it's too late, and Bob commits suicide. This scene is too graphic for YouTube, so I'm obviously not going to show it, but I can't tell you how shocked I was the first time I saw this scene. This is probably the most stressful scene in the whole movie, but it's so masterfully crafted that I can't help but praise its execution. After Bob dies, Loki's face is full of regret and he starts to tear up as the others go to call a rescue ambulance. Loki never intended for it to end this way, so it's good to see him regret handling the situation the way he did. Also, this is beside the point, but every time I see this scene, I'm reminded of how much I love Jake Gyllenhaal. He really is one of the best actors working today. We hear the sound of Keller saying the Lord's Prayer again, and we transition back to the apartment house. When he gets to the part that says, "And forgive us our trespasses," he can't bring himself to say, "as we forgive those who trespass against us." Keller is coming to terms with the fact that his daughter might actually be dead, and so he can't bring himself to forgive those who kidnapped and possibly murdered his daughter. Whether that's Alex or Bob. Bob's body is being carried out, and the captain scolds Loki for not being able to get any answers out of Bob about the maze. Loki realizes how bad he messed up, but the question becomes whether or not it's too long for him to make it right. Keller is ready to give up on Alex as he doesn't know what to do with him anymore. Alex tells Keller that the girls are in a maze. Keller wants specifics on the maze, but Alex doesn't answer. We see him get angry for a moment, and then we see Keller pull up to the house where Alex lives. When Holly answers the door to Keller, he tells her that he knows that he scared Alex at the police station and feels like he's somewhat responsible for Alex going missing, implying that Alex ran out of fear. Holly invites Keller inside, and we learn a lot more information about Alex's family. Holly tells Keller that she and her now deceased husband used to be devout Christians who used to spread the word of God around the country. However, they had a son that died of cancer and it shook their faith. They coped by adopting their nephew Alex, but that raising him wasn't so easy after Alex had an accident. It's vaguely described, but Holly's husband used to have snakes, and apparently Alex had an accident of some sort with the snakes, which she said he was very scared of. And after this accident, Alex started choosing his words a little too carefully, which is why he doesn't talk very much. This information is very hard for Keller to hear, as he sees that his enemy has traumas and struggles too. We really start to see the humanity in these characters shine in this scene. Keller gives his condolences to Holly, and he quickly notices a newspaper on the table with the story of Bob's suicide. Holly was sorry that Keller had to find out this way, but that she felt it was better than Bob waiting for years on death row. The captain is talking to Loki in his office. Loki isn't in trouble for his mistake, but he still feels regret for handling the situation the way he did. Loki's looking down at the unfinished maze, trying to discover its meaning. There's some interesting details in these close-ups. The first is that Loki is fingering his hair, signifying that he's under more stress than he typically is. There also seems to be little black spots in the middle of the maze that might actually be dried tears from Loki that messed up the ink. These little details are great for the next scene, where Loki wrecks everything on his desk. He facepalms again in agony, and we see this incredible shot from behind his chair. I love how in the scene where Bob killed himself, Loki was wearing his blue uniform. Now he's wearing black. I like to think that the black symbolizes the darkness he feels inside, given that he might not be able to solve this case. It's also noteworthy that right before this death scene, the captain was trying to tell Loki that there's no shame in not being able to solve every case, even though it destroys Loki's perfect reputation as a detective. Loki rediscovers the toy RV, serving as a horrible reminder, so when he knocks it off his desk, it brings his attention to a photo he took of the corpse from the priest's basement, and he notices the corpse maze necklace is similar to the one that Bob drew. Loki gets called back to help investigate Bob's house. A crew of investigators find that Bob buried kid-sized mannequins in his backyard. We learn here that the blood found on the kids' clothes is actually pig's blood, which explains the pig head found in Bob's sink. We also find out that with the exception of the clothes that were identified, the rest of the kids' clothes still had tags on them, which means that it's highly unlikely that Bob killed the girls. We go inside the house and we find out that Bob was actually a copycat criminal of the Invisible Man. It turns out that Bob was actually kidnapped and drugged as a kid and ran away from his captor. Bob couldn't remember the captor, so he was never found or caught. The agents found a book in Bob's attic called Finding the Invisible Man. It was written by an ex-FBI agent, and it's about a theoretical suspect who the writer believed was responsible for a bunch of abductions. The book seems to be mostly discredited, but because Bob couldn't remember anything about his captor, he came to the conclusion that he was abducted by the Invisible Man. And it turns out that Bob's journal filled with mazes were all exact matches to mazes shown in this book. Loki shows the other agent the drawing that Bob did and how it matches to the maze found on the corpse. It turns out that the maze Bob drew is an unsolvable maze from the book, so it's impossible for the maze to be a map to the bodies, but Loki still doesn't understand how it's possible for the girls to be alive when their parents identified some of their clothes. He flips through his notepad and remembers that Bob went into the Dover's house and left a window open. Loki rushes to the Dover's house and searches under the window where Bob jumped out of. He finds a matching sock to the one that Keller identified, the one with the pink bunny, which means that Bob went into the family's houses to steal some of their girls' clothes in order to trick the police into believing that the girls were dead. Bob didn't kidnap the girls, he was just acting out as a fake copycat, which is a really dark and messed up way for him to cope with the fact that he was abducted as a kid. We cut to see Grace lying in bed, and she gets a very surprising phone call. Keller pulls up to the house, and Grace comes out telling him they need to go to the hospital because Joy has been found. They still haven't found Anna, but Joy might know where she is. The Dovers meet the Burges at the hospital, and Joy is asleep because she was drugged. When she wakes up, Keller asks about Anna. Joy has some horrifying flashbacks. We see a maze puzzle book with a note that says, "Finish all the mazes and you can go home." We also see the girls unconscious on the floor with 2 big bottles of dark liquid with no labels on them sitting next to them. We see a shot with tape over Joy's mouth, and then we see a shot of someone stopping Anna from running away while Joy was able to get away. Joy almost gets hit in traffic, and some random lady saves her from getting hit. Joy starts crying and tells Keller that he was there. He's confused and asks where, and Joy says they put tape on our mouths. I know this was cut together really quickly, but if you're confused, let me explain. This flashback tells us that Joy finished the maze and was allowed out of the house, and Anna tried to escape at the same time, but got caught before she could get out. Joy ran close to traffic and got saved by a lady. This lady would have been the person to call the police and the ambulance about this missing girl. When Joy tells Keller that he was there, she's referring to Holly's house, because Keller went to visit Holly earlier in the movie. Joy knew he was there because she could hear the sound of his voice, but she couldn't do anything because she was drugged and had tape on her mouth to keep her silent, revealing that Holly was the one who kidnapped the girls. Keller puts the pieces together in his head and quickly flees the hospital without announcement. He runs at the same time Loki and the police show up at the hospital, and they chase Keller because they need to have him present to ask questions. Keller loses Loki in traffic, and Loki thinks that Keller is going to the apartment house just to find out that he's not there. But Loki hears Alex's screams from inside the building. Loki walks up to the shower and the screen fades to black. We don't even see Loki rescue Alex, but we know he did. I personally like that we don't see Alex getting rescued, as it would have made the scene feel a lot more tacked on in my opinion. Denis Villeneuve knew when to use suggestions. The black fades into Keller at Holly's house with the tool bag. He tells her that he still feels sorry about the police station incident and offers to fix her door. Holly knows why Keller is really here, because he apologized for the same incident earlier in the movie, but she plays along and invites him inside. Keller heads over to the kitchen and he stops and says, "I don't want to have to hurt you. I know they were here." Holly points a gun at him and tells him to put his hands on his head and forces him to walk over to the counter. She makes him open a drawer with handcuffs inside and orders him to put them on. She says, "You don't know me, Mr. Dover, but believe me when I tell you I won't let you go." She pulls out a bottle of the dark liquid that we saw from Joy's flashback and tells him to drink a third of it. He hesitates, and then she threatens to kill him and have his daughter come and clean up his body if he doesn't drink it. He demands that he see his daughter, and Holly says that the bottle is his ticket to Anna. Keller drinks from the bottle and his phone starts ringing. Holly forces Keller to put the phone in the sink's disposal and to put his car keys on the table. She takes him outside and walks him over to a car. On the walk over, she makes fun of Keller's face and says that her husband had the same look when they lost their son. She then reveals that they actually kidnapped Alex, and that his real name was something like Jimmy or Barry. It's been so long she can't remember, as Alex was the first kid they ever abducted. Now we know what Alex meant when he said that he wasn't Alex. She also admits that she was the one who kidnapped Bob as a kid, and she forgot about him until she read about his death in the paper. She makes Keller get inside the car and reveals her motive for her years of kidnapping. She says making children disappear is the war we wage with God. Makes people lose their faith, turns them into demons like you. Had to slow down once my husband disappeared, but I do what I can. If you remember earlier in the movie, Holly talked about how she and her husband were devout Christians until their son died, and then they started to question their faith. So they decided to start kidnapping other people's children as a way to exact vengeance on God for taking their son. This also tells us that Holly lied to Loki about her husband dying, as he actually went missing. She makes Keller start the car and back up a few feet. Holly tells Keller that Alex didn't lay a finger on the girls, he just stupidly offered them a ride in the RV. It was Holly who decided to keep the girls. Now we know what Alex meant when he said they were crying once he left them. When Keller steps out of the car, Holly shows him a piece of the walkway with a hole underneath it. She suggests that Anna might be down in there and that the only way to find out is if Keller gets down inside. Holly reveals that she hid the girls down there when the police came looking, explaining how the police weren't able to find the girls. Holly tells Keller to get in the hole. He says that if she wants him to get in, she'll have to shoot him. So she shoots his foot and he gets in the hole. Before Holly closes the lid on him, she suggests that he find a way to slow the bleeding, because she would love for him to still be alive when she dumps Anna's body down there. She covers the hole again with the car and takes Keller's truck and hides it in the woods. We cut briefly to the apartment house, and the captain tells Loki to go over to Holly's to let her know that they found Alex. Holly finds a gun inside of Keller's tool bag, revealing his plan in being there. Keller in the hole has a flashlight on him, and he starts crawling around and looking for something to cover his bullet wound with. He instead comes across a red whistle, an exact match to the emergency whistle that Anna had in Keller's dream, showing that Anna and Joy succeeded in finding her whistle at the Dovers' house, but Anna never felt a need to use it when Alex drove them in the RV, as she didn't think she was in danger. Keller prays for God to protect Anna, and we see Loki pull up to the property. Loki knocks on the door to no response, and we see Holly go inside the room we saw in Joy's flashback. Anna is waking up and Loki goes inside the house. He finds a photo of Holly's deceased husband, and he's wearing the maze pendant found on the corpse in the priest's basement. Now we know that the corpse in the priest's basement was Holly's husband. So her husband is actually dead, but there's no way she could have ever known about that. All she knew was that her husband went missing, and as it turns out, he was indeed killed. The maze pendant matching the maze from Bob's book also tells us that Holly's husband was the Invisible Man, meaning that Bob was right all along about his captor. Loki has a look of despair on his face, soaking in the density of all the puzzles he's just solved. He hears floorboard creaks from the other room, and stressfully walks through the house as his eyes blink again. He finds Holly getting ready to inject Anna with a syringe. All these reveals also tell us that inside those bottles are LSD ketamine. When we learned about Bob's backstory, Loki said that Bob was drugged with LSD ketamine. We also now know what Keller drank a few minutes ago. Loki holds Holly at gunpoint and tells her to show her hands. Holly quick draws and grazes Loki across the head, but Loki is able to kill her in the process. Loki survives and rescues Anna. We then see an intense driving montage where bloody Loki is driving like a madman through the pouring rain to get Anna to a hospital. He rushes inside the hospital with Anna in his arms and we fade to black. Loki is now reading a newspaper. He finds out about Keller's disappearance, and then we find out that Alex, whose real name is Barry Milland, reunites with his real family. Some of the best news in the whole film. Loki survived the gunshot wound, and we see Grace roll Anna in to see Loki. Anna is going to be okay and walking around in a few days. Some more great news for these characters. She also has a new red whistle around her neck. Grace speaks alone with Loki, and Loki thinks that she found her whistle. Grace says that she got her a new one after Anna told her that she and Joy found the whistle on Thanksgiving. Grace thinks that Anna is just confused. Oh, if only she knew what we saw in the hole. Grace also tells Loki about how Keller hasn't contacted her since the night before. She thinks that Loki won't believe her, but Loki does believe her, considering he's read the paper. Grace asks if Loki will be able to find him. Loki is sure that he will, and even though Grace's information on Keller's actions are pretty limited, she's almost positive that Keller will spend some time in jail. Loki assures her that that is highly likely. Grace is sad to hear about that, but she still misses him and tells Loki that Keller is still a good man. Loki doesn't respond, which I personally like, as Loki knows the complexity of this situation entirely. Keller is well-intentioned, and he's a good man deep down inside, but he did do horrible things. We've arrived at the final scene in the movie. Loki is at Holly's house where the property is being excavated. The excavators leave for the night, and Loki is standing around and hears the sound of a whistle. At first he thinks that he's just hearing things, but then he hears it a few more times, and we see it in his face that he remembers what Grace told him about the whistle. Loki knows that Keller is close by, and then we cut to black, and we've now witnessed one of the most masterfully crafted mystery movies of all time. So what conclusion does this analysis bring us to? Well, in the intro, I said that I would explain why I feel the film is so underrated. Part of that, in my opinion, has to do with the unconventional way in which the film goes about its mystery. The mystery of the movie is what happened to the girls, and even though the entire premise of the film is dedicated to solving that mystery, it's also a character movie about how each of the different characters react differently to such a horrible event. We see good men like Keller and Franklin do things they wouldn't dream of doing had their daughters not disappeared. We see the horrible realities of the situation way down on Loki, which is a very compelling thing to see happen to the hero of our story. We see a man who's been successful in solving every case thus far come to grips with the reality that he may not be able to solve every case, making us question whether or not Loki is even emotionally capable of working in law enforcement. I also love how Denis Villeneuve knew what scenes to not show. This is another aspect that I think makes people underestimate how good Prisoners actually is. Something you may not think about is the fact that we don't even see the girls get kidnapped. This trick makes the investigation more terrifying than it already is. You actually have to imagine all the horrific possibilities that could have happened. I also like how we don't see Loki break Alex out of the shower, or how we don't see Anna getting medical attention, or how we don't see Loki search for a whistling Keller. They're all just tricks to make you question if the perceived and suggested happy ending is actually a relieving conclusion. Did these situations end happily? Or was it just a way to distract the audience from the other horrific possibilities in an already dark and bleak world? Thankfully, Alex was reunited with his family, and Anna was okay, so those ended happily. But what about Keller? Well, the film screenwriter Aaron Guzikowski has since confirmed that Loki did find Keller alive, so we can all take a deep breath hearing that great news. However, the suggestion of his finding being ambiguous adds to the masterful world building of this film. The whole film is shot in a very cool, blue, gray, rainy day kind of feeling. The world is cold and desolate, it's depressing. And that world building combined with the incredible direction and the phenomenal acting really makes you feel as if you're a part of this world. The film also forces you to pay attention to the details of the scenes in order to get a full picture of how the kidnapping happened, while the hero of our story is doing the same thing, which is actually pretty cool to think about. In the end, Prisoners is a story that you've likely seen before that is executed in ways that you probably haven't seen before. You probably didn't even bother to think about it because you just wanted to leave this depressing world, which is something I honestly can't even blame you for. So maybe you saw Prisoners and enjoyed it, and perhaps you see the film differently now. Or maybe I just helped you realize things you didn't previously realize. However you feel about this film, I hope that my analysis was able to give you some insight as to why I love this film, and to why I feel this film gets overlooked when it deserves so much more praise. I try to look at movies from the perspective of the director and see what it is that they're trying to convey with their story. I feel that Prisoners is one of the most well-directed movies that I've ever seen. And even though 2013 was loaded with excellent movies, I think that Prisoners might take the top spot for me due to its masterful direction, storytelling, writing, and acting. An underrated movie that I hope becomes a classic among lovers of film and lovers of mysteries and psychological thrillers. And those are the reasons why I think Prisoners is an overlooked masterpiece that is still worth watching a decade later. Thank you all so much as always for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. I don't plan on doing these kinds of analysis videos all the time, but I will make them on occasion for films that I feel deserve a deeper commentary. Let me guys know what you thought of this video or of the film in the comments below. If you want to support the channel, make sure to hit the like button and feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified about my latest videos. I also kindly ask you click on the link in the description to go follow me on my other socials where I post other types of content. I also am getting into the habit of streaming on Twitch, and I would really appreciate it if you went and followed me over there, where I plan to do more live streams in the near future. Thank you guys so much as always for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.